that his partner got shot in between both of his knees. So John, with his partner with Cal Fishing Game, waited for a helicopter to be saved for about 3 hours. I talked to Sonic. I said, "Hey man, I think we need to go up there." I talked to Daily Caller, and then what Daily Caller did is like, "Hey man, you go up there by yourself for 2 weeks, and then you come back and tell us everything, and then we'll see if we're gonna investigate it." So I go up there for 2 weeks, and I'm used to what I heard in the desert, so I know what to expect. But it was at another level up there. So first, I meet a firefighter, and he goes, "Hey man, because of the marijuana grows and because how armed these guys are." He gives me a map. He's like, "These are all the residents or the neighborhoods we can't go to on a 911 call." So it's like, if there's a fire, we don't even attend, because he's like, there's literally Asian guys with like AKs now that they shoot at us. They do. He's like, now in America. So the way he explained it, saying the only way they could respond to a 911 call, they now have to call the sheriff of Siskiyou County or whatever, and the sheriff has to accompany that firefighter, or they just won't do it. Amazon, there's a bunch of they broke it down, a bunch of neighborhoods up there. Amazon won't deliver it anymore. UPS can't send any workers up there.
They'll send a drone.
Ambulances. So same thing. Like they got a 911 call. Ambulances can't go up there. So it just started, little by little. And then we met a teacher up there who owned property on a mountain in NorCal. And so she was telling us that she went on a summer vacation. And then during that summer vacation, essentially what happened was a bunch of Mexican and Chinese moved into that property, tapped into the water lines, and then actually camped out there. So they actually built huts and camps on her mountain and tapped into the water every day. So while on summer vacation, she just calls her son. She says, "Hey, Bobby, can you just go check on the property, make sure blah, 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 whatever." So according to her son, and I spoke to both of them to verify the story, according to his son, he drives up, and then when he went to go check the water tank, saw like 4 or 5 Mexican guys armed. Obviously, they were tapping into the water line. He just immediately did a U and had to call law enforcement. And then law enforcement went up there a week later and cleared out. Those guys were already out there. So we went up there after to see the aftermath, just to see all the lines. Was interesting to see the huts. So to see how like these guys were living was fascinating. And then the worst part is that she was telling me that at the end of this whole thing, Cal Fishing Game actually billed her for the environmental damage. That's another part of the story.
Oh, they billed her for what they did.
Yeah, because technically,
that's nice.
All of that, because because the thing is, these guys also bring in these chemicals from Mexico that are banned here in the U.S. to put on the weed because they don't want the animals to eat them. So she ended up getting billed for them like over 30 grand by Cal Fishing Game, and it was just like I said, bro. It was just crazy how this just kind of kept opening up, and it was just such a big story that me and Sonic, just like I said, we kept pursuing it. We put a second documentary out from Northern California. That was when I was telling you before. John Norris, who was the original Cal Fishing Game guy. For those who don't know, John Norris, back in around 2003. He gets a call that from a rancher. So you remember, Cal Fishing Game just deals with animal stuff, rancher stuff, nothing big.
It's hilarious how like these random ass government organizations that no one thinks about suddenly like fall into some crazy story like you're gonna tell right now, and then they're like, "Well, it's all yours, boys. Get your guns, have fun."
So John Norris back in like 2003 gets a call about water being diverted on a river from a rancher. So this rancher goes, "Hey man, I have a river here. My animals get water from, but it's being diverted." But he's like, "I've been following the diversion, but it's so far, I called you guys." So John and his partner then follow this diversion, and then ultimately it leads them to a field with 2,000 marijuana plants. And according to John, it was being guarded by Mexicans with AKs in kind of military outfits, so basically camouflage outfits. So they were definitely hiding from some type of entity. So John goes, reports it. They tell him to do a follow-up investigation. They go and they raid it. They take down the grows, whatever. And one thing that John notices really early on is that the amount of chemicals that these guys brought in and all the environmental damage they have already caused. Because law enforcement, because he's bringing in the law enforcement from North Cal, they only care about the criminal aspect, right? But John, as a Cal Fishing Game guy, he worries about the environmental damage. So that's one thing that he picked up on. And according to John, when we spoke, he said a couple months later, he stumbled on the second one, but with his partner, that his partner got shot in between both of his knees. So John, with his partner with Cal Fishing Game, waited for a helicopter to be saved for about 3 hours. And it was then Cal Fishing Game got together with law enforcement and be like, "Hey, this is a bigger deal than just water diversions or growing a weed plant." And then John Norris essentially this is the first guy to ever start raiding these illegal marijuana grows, and he developed what's called the Delta Team for a cow fishing game, which is essentially a sniper expert marijuana eradication team that goes in there, raids these grows. They're trained to go combat with these Mexican guys, AK-47s, rescue missions, and so I'm in, when I was in college, I found out about John through John. I'm listening to Joe Rogan, and John's on there, and I found it interesting. I'm being a California kid, like, what the heck, cartels, marijuana? But I didn't think of anything of it. I was 22, years gone by. And then John reached out to me because he actually watched our first documentary and he loved it. And then he actually collaborated in the one in Northern California. So the great thing was to have John with us, to have a real expert on the ground. And he could just all the stuff he was seeing, he says that he saw in his early days, but now that it was times at 100, he said the whole growing on the properties makes it just so much harder for law enforcement. And he was I think the other angle too now is that the border wasn't an issue when John was working the way it is now. So just the influx of migrants that these guys could bring in who could work was fascinating. That first firefighter that we interviewed, he actually rescued 3 migrants that were being basically held captive on one of these marijuana grows. So he shared those stories. So just to have John with us was fascinating and grateful for his expertise too on top of it.
What year again did he first?
This was in 2003, and then John collabs with us on this documentary in 2002. So even 19 years later,
or 2022.
Yeah, 20. Like he said, the problem is 100 times worse. Now at that time it was strictly Mexicans. Now you have Chinese. the Chinese, the Asian, and then like I said, we're further investigating. And the great thing with Siskiyou County Sheriffs and San Bernardino did this with us too, is they gave us access on the raids, which was key. So on the day of the raid, it was crazy because we hop in with Siskiyou County Sheriffs and we're driving in the dirt roads, and as we're heading to the grows, all the Hmongs are leaving their grows because they know they're about to get raided. So all these Hmongs are leaving. But there's still workers on these grows. So as soon as we get on a grow, these guys raid it, and there was a couple of workers, they go bust them. And obviously the first thing me and Sadiq want to do is we want to talk to these workers because it's we want to find out more on the story, right? It's obviously we can find out as much as we can through law enforcement and all this stuff, but let's talk to the actual workers. And me and Sadiq, we met this married Hmong couple who got recruited online, who lived in Minnesota, who got recruited on WhatsApp, and then through WhatsApp got recruited to move to California to grow marijuana, and that they were promised $5,000 a month growing weed. So they basically up in their life, moved to Siskiyou. I mean, this is the middle of nowhere in Northern California. We're talking about super small towns with populations of 600 people. Basically grow marijuana for their boss, they don't even know who the boss is. That's the thing, is these guys who really run these grows are never on the properties. It's almost like a shadow government. So we interviewed this couple and we're like, how long have you guys been doing this? So they've been doing it for 2 months. They've been living in a shack. That's another thing too. The living conditions are brutal for these. Yeah. Many of these workers have died because of the carbon monoxide of the generators. But so they were living in shacks, and we're like, so how much money did you make in these 2 months? I'm expecting to hear $10,000. Here's the cash. Zero. And they were essentially, what they didn't know is that they were basically being held captive. They still thought they were going to pay. It's dude, they were never going to get paid. And that's one thing that the cop was breaking down that was kind of sad. It was at the end of this whole ordeal, there's the one who's, they're going to get arrested. They're going to get charged. And the guy who's really running this is always going to go untouched. Because then for them, they don't care. If this property gets raided, you could just bring in more workers. It's just a crazy ordeal, man, of what we stumbled on in North Cal. We were up in Dorey. So Dorey is the town right before you get to Oregon, and it was a population
all the way up there.
Yeah, we were. Dorey had a population of 1,000 people, and they had 1,500 grows in their town. So they had more grows than people.
Isn't this where is his name David Holtzclaw? Did I get that right? The documentary guy. Didn't he make a documentary on something like this? Right. Yeah, I didn't make that up. No, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, wow. There's so much on the bone here.
Yeah.
To get at. I want to try to break some of this down for people to understand.
I just want to add this last thing.
Please,
just on this. And then, so obviously we produced that documentary, and it did great.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.